Does a standard family law case look like? For the most part, what will happen is the case is filed, and then generally speaking, if necessary, we'll ask for temporary orders. Okay, and so you will either go to a temporary orders hearing and get your temporary custody, your temporary child support. If there needs to be injunctions or what's known as temporary restraining orders, those will be addressed in a temporary hearing. Also, who stays in the house and who has to maybe get out of the house. The visitation, temporary visitation too of the children. Generally speaking, a lot of times, family law attorneys can work that out between themselves, and you'll cancel the hearing and enter an agreed order. Then we move on to discovery, and discovery is where we discover, the salient facts about your case and the size and character of your estate, your marital estate, whether it's community property or separate property. That's going to take a period of about 60 days in there at a minimum. Then the next point is that we would go to mediation. So it's important that an attorney, a family law attorney, knows as much as possible about your assets, your debts, your children, your spouse, so that when you go to mediation, they can advise you adequately. They can say, because it's very stressful going through a divorce, and sometimes it's even necessary to remind them, well, wait a minute, you were concerned about, keeping the animals because he travels or something like that, so that they can make good decisions. And so that's kind of it. And then we either draft the divorce, the mediated settlement agreement, into what's called a final decree of divorce, or we set ourselves for trial and go to trial. Why am I good at trial? Well, I started out as a civil litigator, and so and I very much enjoy it. And then when I've always done family law, and at some point I restricted my practice to family law, and then I became board certified in family law. And I try to settle cases just like any good family lawyer does, and for the most part my figures are probably pretty good for settlement. But if it comes a time that you're one of those cases that has to go to trial, I'm prepared, you'll be prepared, and we'll know what we're doing. And for the most part, I try to walk a client through what a trial would look like if they're going to have to go to trial. I can prepare them in many ways. Sometimes even it helps to take a client to a courtroom so they can kind of see, here's where you're going to sit, there'll be a court reporter over here, things that can make having to go to court less traumatic. It's never a good time for anyone, any client, but there's ways to make it more palatable. What does child custody look like in Texas courts or in Texas family law? Generally, there's a presumption that both parents are going to be joint managing conservators, okay? There's going to be a primary conservator, and the primary is the person who gets to designate the primary residence of the children. There's going to also be a presumption that the standard visitation order is in the best interest of the children, and most people are familiar with this. That's when you have the first, the third, and the fifth weekend. And if there is a fifth weekend, and you have a block of time in the summer for your summer vacations and your summer visiting, and then holiday times, and if the children have a spring break and a fall break, all of those areas will be assigned in visitation. We call parents conservators, and we list out their rights. All parents have rights and duties, and they're inherent to most parents. They know these things. You have the right of moral and religious training. You have the right to go to their schools and converse with their teachers. You have the right to determine what education they're going to have. We designate all those rights. And sometimes people want rights, like they want to agree upon things, like whether a child can marry underage. Sometimes parents will say, well, we probably need to agree on that, in which case we can do those things. People are also familiar with duties, parental duties. You have to support your child until the age of 18. Okay? You have to provide food, clothing, and shelter. And so people are familiar with rights and duties, but the court will delineate them, and in some instances you'll share the same duties, or you'll share a duty with right of agreement. In other words, one parent can't unilaterally decide something. They have to talk to the other parent and reach an agreement, and sometimes there are exclusive rights. Generally, in most cases, there's always exceptions, but generally the only exclusive right is going to be the right to designate the primary residence of the children and the right to child support.